Hey everybody. Admittedly, today's video is a little long. There's a lot of great and valuable information in here from Charles Dundon and Jamie Bopp at Dundon Motorsports. To make it easier for your viewing, we've broken it into chapters. So if you look down in the description below, you'll see the chapters and you can fast forward to sections of the video to watch what's important to you, or you come back over a period of days and you watch the whole thing. Appreciate your support and thanks a lot. So first of all, guys, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to do this. And I think there's folks out there. I mean, you guys have a presence on social media, your YouTube channel, etc. You were doing the Whiskey Friday. I was watching your chat
Right.
on Friday afternoon.
That was crazy. I just decided, I was like, well, it's Friday. We've been talking about this. May as well just do it. And like 300 people watched. I was like, wow, okay.
And you're like trying to go through the questions and you're like, all right, I wasn't expecting all this.
Right. I'll be a little bit more prepared next time. But yeah, for the first time, that worked out really well.
That's a great thing. I mean, that's a really cool thing. It's really about, some of it's just the story. You know, I know you shared a little bit of it on the Whiskey Friday about how Dundon, came to be, yourself. Yep. You were like, hey, how was this? And, run into Charles, and Charles, whether he was a mechanic at Porsche or what he was doing at the time, just a matter of, just understanding just how you came to be. And then, what kind of inspired you guys to get into your first product, if you will.
Charles, feel free to jump in at any point, but I'll tell it from my side. And probably the best way to start it is Charles had already been building exhausts for 996 and 997s before I came along.
Okay.
I bought a 997 .1 GT3 RS, talked to a few of the local guys, and asked them where I should go get service, where I should go get, stuff done. And they're like, oh, you need to go see Charles. There's one guy in particular, his name's PJ Smith. And he's local track rat, used to track a lot more. Now he's got kids. He doesn't track as much. He was pretty instrumental in putting Charles and I together. And then things started to happen organically. I bought a set of headers from M&M in Germany, and Charles got them. And he's like, yeah, these are okay. I could do better. The stuff that I've got's better. And I was like, really? And then we started talking about it. And the thing that floored me about Charles was, you don't expect and this sounds denigrating, and it's not intended to be, right? You don't expect a Porsche tech to be able to do high level math, like calculus, differential equations, actual solving for, pulsed wave theory in an exhaust. And Charles was explaining to me the math, and I'm a chemical engineer. So I was like, hold the phone.
Yeah, right.
What the hell's going on? Yeah. So that became very intriguing. And then Charles and I sat down. I was like, okay, how are you, quote, stuck doing this when it's obvious that you want to do something else? Right. And I'll let Charles talk a little bit about his history getting to that point. So Charles, why don't you take over with ASP and some of that?
Yeah, when I worked at the local Porsche dealer in Bellevue for about 4 years. And then sometime, halfway through, it all starts with working on your own car, doing a little bit of R&D, and everyone just always goes the turbo route or supercharge and anything forced induction, because, they don't know how to. Naturally aspirated power isn't difficult. It's just, or even a different understanding, at least for me, but it's just, everyone has a hard time, making horsepower on a naturally aspirated car. So I got bored with one of my cars that was making a pretty absurd amount of horsepower, breaking parts, gearboxes, axles, and then kind of just got bored with it and wanted to say, hey, well, what can we make with this, NA? And threw some stuff together and was like, yeah, that doesn't make any power, and threw these other headers on these other guys made, and 2 of them went backwards and they looked really good, and it was just kind of like, wait, this doesn't make sense. And this was probably 15, 16 years ago. So I said, okay, I'm going to, clearly this engine's pretty sensitive for what was in it, and it's just a $2,000 Nissan motor at this point. And I just sat down and just did some research. And by research, reading, I had a SAE.org subscription, read a lot of SAE papers. You know, what do they do in actual race cars? You know, Formula One, NASCAR, and so on and so forth. So I spent months just reading, researching, learning just what all's involved with it. And then finally was like, okay, I think I know what I'm doing. Let me go to and apply something, and built a header, and it was better. And, you know, I had a hypothesis, didn't do what it was supposed to. And okay, well, why didn't it do this? And it was probably about a year's worth of development before, I don't want to say before I finally got somewhere, but before I kind of had an understanding of what all was going on clearly and could actually make educated decisions on what to adjust, change, or in the design, or, you know, when something's already built. And spent a lot of time there. Met another guy, more in the Honda world, and he still owns that business. I wound up stepping out of there about 10 years ago. Just wasn't the direction I wanted to go, because I just have a heavy Porsche background at this point. We did a lot there. And then sometime around 2006, met PJ Smith, and he had a 996 GT3. It was pre-owned, used. Actually, I think he got it from Roger Jobs, now that I think about it. And did a lot of work on that right after I left the dealer, and then said, hey, do you want an exhaust? I've been wanting to build one. You know, I've learned a lot. And, you know, if you pay for the parts, I'll do all the labor for free, and took a stab at it. And,
not a bad deal.
Made a few changes. Yeah, he was like, okay, you know, what's the materials? And said, here's my raw cost on it. And spent some time on the dyno and got something that everyone said was impossible, the amount of power we were making. You know, everyone's like, oh yeah, full exhaust is, you know, it's about 10 horsepower with the tune. And shoot, I think I was getting 27, almost 30 peak the wheels, and everyone said it was impossible. But you know, it was a bit of development time there, and you know, learned a lot on a lot of the Honda motors we were doing back then, because it was getting pretty heavy into the drag racing. But it was a very constricted environment. It wasn't free where I could just sit back, do some research, some development, you know, actually applying true engineering and physics to it, not just, well, let's just build what fits in the car and sell it. So yeah, PJ stuff, Daryl, a few other guys I have around the country. I built a few for, you know, probably 6 or 7 exhausts. And one of the designs we actually still build today is one that I designed 2008, 2009, I guess. Yep. Basically made a few refinements just to make it easier to build and faster to build, but the same basic design of it's the same.
That's pretty solid. I mean, that's pretty solid. Like you said, from back then and all that you've learned and you've gained here, that, you know, that exhaust is still there. So it sounds to me like the learning and the chasing is part of the fun. You know, you doing the math and the calculations, and like kind of determined to say, I'm going to figure out to make this work. But the thing I think is interesting is it's not just the math, it's then going and taking that and applying it in the true sense, where you're actually, you know, manufacturing the actual exhaust itself. I don't know, I find
that was actually what seems like the easy part. Is there's a lot of guys out there who have a lot of talent and skill, and they can build one exhaust on a car.
Right.
So their friend wants one, they need the car back to build it again. So it's more work than you'd think on some of these, at least for Porsches, to be able to build all the fixtures and the tooling and get the materials bent to actually build them and replicate them and build them over and over, you know, flawlessly. And one of the other aspects nobody considers is the material. And kind of from day one, I had an experience with 321 about 15 years ago over 304, and I hadn't even heard of it. And it was actually through one of our other colleagues, Mike Kojima. He owns MotoIQ.com. He's a motorsports engineer, extremely intelligent, very humble, and taught me a couple things, and didn't really teach me a couple things, said a couple things for me to go, I wonder why that is. And, you know, well, go figure out and learn, you know, nothing being spoon fed. And so I learned the value of better grade materials, not just what's available and cheap. So
is that so for folks who don't know, how would we explain the difference between 304 stainless and 321?
So the main difference, which they're very similar composition, the main difference is 321 has mainly, the main element is more titanium in it. And somebody can feel free to correct me. There's plenty of metallurgists out there that know more than I do on it. I know, and I have a lot of this stuff written down. Not all of it's burned in my head, but it has more titanium in it and more chromium, and the titanium helps stabilize the chromium, which that in turn helps with a few other extras in there. It helps it stabilize it at high temperatures. And the main benefit is 321 has about double the strength as 304 does at about 13 to 1500 degrees Fahrenheit on average. So the nice part too is you can actually reduce the wall thickness to a thinner material and retain the same strength. It also winds up having less thermal expansion, so it's less prone to cracking, fatigue. It doesn't work hard in the same way. It actually, if we get the headers hot on the dyno, red hot, and then let them cool down gradually, but we'll actually re-anneal them. So if there was any stress in them, it'll actually be de-stressed. So, I've been about 14 years, 321 only, other than a couple minor exceptions for exhaust. And I still warranty stuff to this day that I built years before I met Jamie. And it's one or two
that
things
doesn't fail.
It just doesn't fail. And there's a lot in the design, but the material is a major factor of it.
One of the things that we're going to do, Andy, just so that I don't know if you know this about Alan, but he spent his entire career in specialty steels.
Oh yeah, Alan Coleman.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I've had conversations with him. He's like, he goes way over my head. I mean, the guy knows.
And it's actually one of the things that Alan mentioned to me. At 304 at elevated temperatures, like an exhaust, actually corrodes. It rusts. It's not stainless anymore. So
interesting.
All of these quote stainless exhausts made out of 304, they're failing as you use them. So it is an eventuality that they will crack.
It's going to happen, right?
Correct. Titanium, same thing. There is a lifetime for a titanium exhaust, and it will crack. It's not a thing of I'll warranty it, all this, all that. No, eventually it will. It is possible to make it in a way that it lasts a long time, but that way is very expensive.
At some point it will fail.
Nobody does it, right? So some of our titanium exhaust competitors are starting to see that in practice, and I'm getting these little pictures of, hey, how do I fix this part that has a crack on it? I have a track day. I was like, oh, that's so-and-so's part. You should probably call them.
Yeah. There's not a lot of, you can put a Band-Aid on it, and maybe a little zip tie and give it a little kiss from mama on the boo-boo and cross your fingers. But I've repaired plenty of titanium exhausts. I've built my share of them, and I'm sure they've all broken apart at this point, but
it's why we don't use titanium. We do 321 and we do Inconel, and that's it. We have titanium exhaust tips. That's fine. Yeah. People like the titanium exhaust tips. That's great.
Yeah. In the tips, at least it's at a lower temperature point, but even those could potentially crack, especially if not
over time. So the how did you pronounce it? Inconel?
Inconel. Inconel. Inconel.
Inconel,
it's a trade name.
Okay. Yeah. And I know you have that in your crack pipe. So what material is that?
So Inconel is it's like 321 on steroids. It's what they use on airplanes. It's what they use on rocket nozzles. It's a very, very high temperature, stable.
Well, not only is it's actually very stable, and it's pretty much corrosion resistant. So nuclear submarines, aircraft carriers, everything in those is built out of 625 Inconel. Just because it is one of those materials that you can throw it into the bottom of the ocean, and thousands of years later, it's still going to be there. And you can kind of do that with 321. You can throw it in the ocean. A lot of marine grade exhausts are built from it for short-term use, but I wouldn't leave it in the water for months on end, especially with heat going through it.
So I'm going to go ahead. No, I was going to say, I'm going to go sideways for a second. I'm going to take a break here. And where I'm going to go sideways is, so I had the opportunity to drive Alan's GT3 because he has your exhaust, your headers on there. And when I drove it, the one night, he's like, here, take it for a drive. I didn't realize how much I missed that sound and the pop, especially on the shifts on the GT3.
Sure.
The dot two, so quick. and everything. And like in the RS now, like my stock exhaust just isn't cutting it. So I watched some videos. I think the one was, you know, our friend out there, Mr. Adam LZ, and he did the one because I think he's got the race. I think he put the race headers on, or
no, he's got street headers.
Yeah, because it's a .2. It's a .2. That's
yeah.
right.
He decided. I sent him race headers. He decided he didn't want to put them on. He was happy with the cats on crack, as we call it.
Right.
Yeah.
So there, I think he did some video where he did the comparison.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
I like loud. So I'm in the spot of, is it the street headers with the Inconel, or is it the street headers and the Dundon loud? You know, that's.
So here's the question, or here's how you need to answer it.
Okay.
If driving down the highway for an hour with the car droning is completely unacceptable, then there is no crack pipe in your future.
Okay. And I do drive my car, like from here when I go down to the mountains, it's like a 5-hour drive.
Correct.
Yeah. Generally, if you have any reservation for it, we just say no. You got to tell us that
Correct.
you deserve
Okay.
want it. I
So
can say
a good
there's
story.
one spot where it's fine, but that's still
A good story is a gentleman that was all over me that I probably talked to for a total of 2.5 hours, off and on over 2 weeks. He's like, I've had a straight pipe Lamborghini. I've had this. I've had that. I want to have a crack pipe.
Ready.
I was like,
I'm ready.
I don't think you should have a crack pipe. This is a street car. That, you know, crack pipe was designed for cup cars, period. That's the only reason that part exists. We had no desire to ever put that on a street car. We have street car pipes.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Great. That part was designed to be light. It was designed to make power where other center deletes do not make power. And in some cases they lose power. And it was designed to be loud. So those were the three criteria that part had when we designed it. What it didn't have was it shouldn't drone. It should have valves. No, none of that. All gone. No, light, simple,
Right.
race car, done.
Yeah,
And so now we have guys.
I know it didn't have the valves. So
Right.
okay,
So
so
then we have
you
guys
know,
wanting to put it on their street car because they love that RSR sound.
right.
It's like, sure.
But you start
but-
driving around and, like you say, long trips or something like that,
Correct.
it might wear
Correct.
on you a little bit.
He took one drive with his wife up into the canyons. I get an email. He's like, "Oh, it's so awesome, but I can't stand it." And I'm like, "Why did we talk for 2 hours, brother?
Yep.
Why did I explicitly try to talk you out of this?"
Okay. Yeah. Well,
You know what I mean?
think
So
you
it's-
just helped me. You just helped me
Correct.
here. Perfect.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
The guys that get a crack pipe are the ones that I cannot absolutely talk them out of it. They're like, yeah, I want that. Yeah, I want that.
Yep,
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, and then we asked them about drone. They're like, drone? What drone?
What's
It isn't
drone?
drone. Can you make it
Yeah.
louder? You know?
Right.
oh wow.
Yeah, those are the.
And this
Yeah.
is actually something that I've figured out over the last few years of doing this is asking somebody what an exhaust sounds like is like trying to have somebody describe what something tastes like.
Yeah.
That's a good analogy.
Andy, how
Yeah.
salty was your dinner last night?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. My salt, you know,
For you, it might have
Tolerance
been
is
perfectly
one
salty. For me,
thing.
I
You
might
may-
choke
right.
and die.
right.
Right. So, and it's trying to get people to do that. And so when Charles and I started Dundon, coming up almost 5 years ago, brother, you believe that? It's been almost 5 years. It feels like 20, but it's only been 5.
Yeah, there's a lot
Yeah.
of work.
Was that we needed to provide people an avenue by which they can try it, right? And we were confident enough once we got to a certain place, you know, with some of the parts, that we could allow them some time period to try it and send it back, because our parts we're still very small, so there's not a lot of our stuff out there, even in the secondary market. And so getting something back that's been, quote, used,
Right.
still has a lot of value, and we could still get it to somebody else in case somebody wasn't happy, because it was really important to us, to both of us, that everybody that's out there finds joy in
Yeah,
the
no,
parts that they have.
and I appreciate that, and I know a host of people appreciate that about you all, and it comes up everywhere your name is mentioned.
And there's so many companies
Yeah.
They just want to sell you a product and exhaust, and that's it. And then you say, oh, I don't, they say 100% satisfaction guarantee. Oh, I want to return it. Oh, you have to pay all the shipping. There's a 50% restocking fee. You have to fill this out. They go through all these hoops. It's so hard that they don't care if you have their product or not. They just don't want to give you your money back. And for me, it's, if you don't want, what we build, what I've designed, what I enjoy doing on your car, then I don't want you to have it either. I don't want you to, suffer because, we're not going to take that back. And it's like Jamie says, we buy used exhaust back all the time, trade them in. Hey, I sold my car. What do I do with this? Oh, here, we'll give you this amount back for it. And then most of the ones, before they even come back in the building, they're already sold. Somebody else already wanted it. It's, my wife won't let me spend this much on an exhaust, but if it was this much, oh, well, we have a used one coming back. Sure, I'll make you a deal.
I have a list.
Same warranty, whether they're used or new. It doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah, when I got mine on the .1, it was Phil's PT3.
Yeah.
It was off of his, he's like, hey, he goes, I have this thing. He's like, so we worked out a deal for the headers and the black loud. And when I put that on the car at the Porsche dealer, when they put it on there for me, to this day, they say of all the exhausts they've done and whatever else, that was like the best sounding exhaust they ever heard. My salesman, he just loved the heck out of that thing. He was a car guy. I used to give him the keys and tell him to go for a ride, and he was just like in love with it.
The thing that Charles and I talk about, and we don't design exhausts to sound a way. We just go out and try and find power. We're the sole attack that we're going after when we're designing a header is to design it to make power. And the sound is a byproduct of a happy engine. Yep. Because when the pressure waves are stronger, meaning that you're making more horsepower, then the sound doesn't just increase in magnitude or volume, it also changes its character.
And the timing, when you get a lot of like a flat plane crank, like an old, or like a Ferrari or the new Ford Coyote versus an old school odd fire V8, same amount of cylinders, everything could be the same on it, but you got a couple cylinders that fire in succession when they should fire not in succession or bank to bank. And they talk about 180-degree headers. A lot of that has a sound component to it, and it does affect power as well. And it might not be hundreds, it might be 20 or 30, but that does affect the sound component of it, which is the piece of the puzzle. I always say that if the exhaust is designed correctly and then manufactured correctly, built correctly, without cutting all these corners out of it, the sound will just follow it, and it'll be pure.
Right.
And I don't want to say correct, but it'll be the most desirable you can get out of it, especially when you have all the cylinders that are even. You don't have crazy unequal length headers, or the exhaust pipe size is the correct diameter. I don't want to say too big or too small, but it's actually the correct size.
Right.
The idea that a Porsche Flat 6 should sound like a Formula One engine is really lost on us. That's really, really lost on us. You can make an engine, quote, sound any way you like. There are other exhaust companies that are like, you really want that high-pitched sound, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, a crack pipe does a really good job because it's made of the same materials as what an RSR exhaust is made from, and similar thicknesses, and the resonance of the material is appropriate for a flat 6 to make it scream the same way. But it sounds like a flat 6. It doesn't sound like a Ferrari V10 from 1990, for example, right? So it's horses for courses, right?
Yeah, what are you chasing? So when
what are you going after? Go ahead.
So when someone is, they're thinking about making a purchase, right, on the exhaust, or even on a Dundon exhaust, what advice, what are a couple of things that you would tell them to, and I think you kind of touched on it here,
Yeah. So I've kind of got some of the things you would say, a script.
Yeah. These are the things you need to look for if you're, going out there looking for an exhaust.
So here's the first question is, are you looking for something to invest in, or are you looking for some noise? So that's kind of the first question. If somebody calls me and says, typically by the time they've picked up the phone and they've called Dundon Motorsports, they've done a bit of research.
Right.
They have an idea that we don't make center deletes, the crack pipe being the glaring exception. It kind of happened. It wasn't it's not a street car center.
Right. Yeah.
So
You
we're just
weren't
gonna
out
leave that.
there. Right.
We're going to leave that off to the side. So by the time they called us, they've at least done their homework. They understand a little bit about what we're about and why, for example, our street headers cost $7,000 when they can go buy a used center delete and get noise for $600 or $700.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So if we're having a conversation, the first thing is, what do you use the car for? Because we pretty much only play with GT cars, and GT cars predominantly fall into two camps: track rats, cars and coffee.
Right. Yeah.
Right. That's generally the two camps, and there's
I'm
guys
a
in the
mountain
middle.
rat, though, I think.
And then
I think
there's guys
I
like
turned
yourself
into a
that are
mountain rat.
right? Backroads guys, these kind of things.
Yeah.
You're not a big cars and coffee guy, so I put you into the track rat category.
Yeah,
You
that's
drive
still
the car.
drivers. That's still the driver's
right.
side.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
And so, for example, a track rat in the Middle East has a lot of options. We can do race headers, crack pipe. They don't have decibel limits at their track. They can go crazy. Blah, off they go. Fine. Somebody like yourself, we need to keep you emissions compliant, which means keeping cats on the car as much as we can, unless you're going to drive it predominantly in a racetrack environment.
Right.
The muffler needs to be something that keeps drone at bay so the car is comfortable to drive. And Porsche did a good job with the design of the center muffler, it having two paths, an upper path and a lower path. The way that we explain drone is like a speaker box when you were young. And there's a frequency that the subwoofer is going to put out that the speaker box can resonate. When your windows are up, the speaker box is the cabin of the car, and the subwoofer is the exhaust. So the subwoofer or the exhaust or your car at 2,500 to 3,000 RPMs puts out about 105 to 115 hertz. And that frequency resonates inside the cabin, and that's what makes it blah, 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 and hurt your ears. So the way the muffler works is there's a longer path with a smaller diameter tube, kind of like a trombone.
Okay.
If we can change that frequency, then it doesn't resonate with the cabin. And that's generally how all that stuff works together. And so we would walk down that path.
And I was going to say the other part of it that no other, I don't want to say no other exhaust company really values in their designs is the volume of the muffler. They just build it whatever's cheap and fits on the car. They don't really process what has to be done. And that's one thing we spend a lot of time with, is making sure that the muffler volume, because that does cancel or amplify certain frequencies as well. And there's a lot that they have these two small little mufflers on there, and they might kill a couple higher frequencies, 2,000 to 3,000 hertz, and they might not do anything in the 100 to 200 hertz range, which is generally where most drone happens. So
that's your cruising around 3,000 to that
2,000 to
range.
3,000 on the freeway.
And is that that hertz, that sound, is that all a result of is it airflow? Is it
it's firing order. It's the exhaust valves opening and how often that is occurring. So it's kind of like a snare drum. It's like tap, 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 tap.
Yeah,
tap,
so just
tap,
putting
tap,
another
tap, tap.
2 cylinders in there changes that natural frequency. That's why V10 and V12s have a higher pitch sound, there's less time in between exhaust valve openings. So you have more, at a given RPM point, you have more compression waves per cycle or per time unit, per minute, per second. So that's why you hear that higher pitch. Even if the engine is at say 10,000 RPMs, it might be at 6,000, but it might sound like your GT3 at 9,000, for example. But yeah, that with all the diameter, length of the pipe, and the, just like Jamie said, the change in path, the different diameter. If we change the diameter of the exhaust pipe itself, changes the frequency as well. So,
so that was a kind of a side squirrel answer to you. Yeah. What do we? How do we step customers down? And honestly, it's a conversation with what it is they want from the car, right? Like I have a customer that I just spoke to over the weekend, that the car is going to be predominantly a track car in Canada. He's like, it doesn't have to be, it can drone. I want lightweight. I want power. I want it to be as fast as it can. Well, these are the parts you need for that. Done. Intake, crack pipe, headers, off you go. You got 50 wheel horsepower.
Yeah. And that's, because I would say I want, some power and a little bit of increased torque,
Sure.
reduced weight. And that's just because I want to get rid of the damn side mufflers because they just produce so much heat and weight. And then, sound too, because the Porsche system, unless you're really screaming along, up above 5,000, it's really kind of
doesn't really do much, right?
Yeah, it doesn't really do much, but I do like the feel. I mean, we felt it on this new engine, the Dot 2, some of the torque down at the lower end. So like on your exhaust too, on your system, when you get that torque down low, then when I get on the gas, get into the apex and then coming out and getting back on the gas, I can get a little bit of extra pull there on the car. Those are probably the things for me.
So for you, Andy, honestly, I would tell you a set of street headers and the intake kit. I would leave the titanium muffler on the car.
Just go with it until
at some point later you wanted more volume.
Okay.
I don't think we've had any of the titanium muffler.
The street headers, it won't fail.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have
the cat.
Robert Rokos has had. He's had street headers on his 991.1 RS pretty much since we made them. So probably coming up 4 years at this point.
And he has the stock center?
Yeah, with the stock center.
Okay.
Race headers, completely different thing. On a Dot 2, race headers will the titanium muffler will succumb to failure probably within 2 sessions on track.
Wow.
Yeah. Like one day. We had a couple that blew, like by lunchtime, it was the whole back of the mufflers gone.
Yeah. Same with all the titanium mufflers. So we've had guys that want to get the other major titanium muffler manufacturer and use those. They went through 6 of them in a season.
Oh my gosh.
And so you got to have a lot of cash, or the dealer you're dealing with has to be really in to keep putting those in for warranty going, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. What the hell are you doing? Right.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of time talking about exhaust. I think it was really good.
Yeah.
I'm providing some of the, the technical component. There's the build and the build quality and materials, and then there's a lot of the research and whatnot that you do to make sure that we're not just making sound or making pretty metal, if you will. But you guys are also you've grown quite a bit in the past few years doing work for, I'll call it, your name is Dundon Motorsports, but stuff that, from a high performance, whether that's, dive planes, gurney flaps, wings, et cetera. Tell me a little bit about, some of the other products besides just the exhaust that folks who are looking
for
high performance.
We'll start on the ones that we do that kind of dovetail out of, the exhaust side, and that's the intake side. So we've spent quite a bit of time in the last couple of years identifying bottlenecks in a naturally aspirated engine, right? And that's really what you're doing. You're trying to find all of the easy wins before you have to dive on the inside of the engine to go find power. And there are always going to be trade-offs when a large OEM manufacturer produces a car. There are always cost constraints or size constraints or time constraints or whatever the stuff is. And we just take all that and shove it out the window and say, how would we redo this?
How would I do that if I had no barriers, right? There was, cost, time, whatever.
Yeah, most everyone doesn't understand the goal, from an OEM manufacturer is, hey, we're going to make thousands, tens of thousands, or other cars, millions of them. And they don't realize that when, Toyota or BMW leaves off 3 bolts and a bracket that costs them $6 on a car that they're going to make 5 million of, $6 times 5 million actually can relate to $20 to $30 million of profit they just gained by not having to produce that part.
Right.
So same thing for Porsche. Now they're not, high volume manufacturer currently. So if they make the exhaust cheaper, I guess. And I'm not saying in a bad way, but they find ways to save money,
Right.
less components. Other ways where they might make it heavier, but it makes it a little faster to manufacture, more cost effective. That's always the goal. Horsepower is never the issue. I mean, Formula One cars exist, so they don't never have to worry about, we can't make any more power with this. But if they just went out and had the next GT3 made 800 horsepower, they'd never, why build another one after that? So always have to keep the line going to make the next car just desirable enough to where you want to buy it and not keep.
Yeah, they got the marketing thing down.
So
exactly.
We kind of roll that out, which is why, again, material 321 straight tubing is actually 10 times the amount of cost of straight raw 304 tubing. 8.5 to 10 times. It is enormously expensive.
So there again, you're building thousands. It adds up, right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And so the throwing the constraints out, finding all the things that we can go after, and giving for lack of a better term, having the tools here. We have our own dynamometer, we have our own dyno cell. We don't have to rely on anybody. We don't use that dyno cell for anything other than our own development.
Yeah, we don't.
We don't have people come in and tune cars. We don't tune, do flash tunes on Subarus or anything else. We find horsepower on naturally aspirated and now turbocharged with the GT2 RS, GT cars for the most part. As far as your comment about what's Dundon Motorsports, who is an engine performance company, that's generally what we do, right? Build engines, build exhaust, build intakes, find ways to make horsepower. What do these guys know about aerodynamics? Well, what we do know are there are other very good small businesses out here in the world. And when you are a bird, you typically can tell what another bird like you looks like, smells like, acts like. If they're a duck, then you're also a duck, and you can tell you're both ducks. How about that? Hey.
Right.
And you end up finding one another. Joey Seeley at Emotion Engineering is one of our largest dealers. He loves our stuff.
Yeah.
And vice versa. We love his stuff. We love it for all the same reasons he loves our stuff. It's well thought out. It works. It adds value to the car. It makes you faster. Fantastic. That's it. Is it expensive? Yeah, his stuff is more expensive than others, but for a good reason. Same thing with Veris. We found Veris. We worked with Veris very early on developing aerodynamics for the 981 GT4, and it doubles the amount of downforce on the car. Again, doubles. The RS package that we have for the GT3 RS. Okay, Porsche's already done aerodynamics on that car. It must be the best it can be. We double it. We double the amount of downforce on the RS. It's the same thing. They have regulations for how big the wing can be. They have regulations for how big it can stick off the back. We don't have any of those regulations. We can slam a giant picnic table on the back of the car if that's what we want, right? And the thing with
what are you looking for? It goes back to your comment you said earlier. What are you looking for, right?
What are you looking for? Exactly.
What do you want to get?
We can do subtle things with the gurney flap. And when you are science-based, when you are physics-based, when you are engineering-based, it's easy to find things that work because the airflow doesn't know that it's going over a Formula One car or a GT3 RS. It doesn't know. It's just air. It's just doing your bidding. If you ask it to do something, it will do the same thing. So that's kind of the basis of it. We dabbled around with suspension for a little while, with Öhlins and, with a couple other shock manufacturers. Öhlins makes a good product. They were a little immature in the market for GT3s when we first started working with them. There was a lot of unfortunate surprises, which isn't great. It is what it is. It's fine. And they also didn't accommodate front axle lift. So that was a huge one, and it really slowed adoption. And that's why we partnered with Motion Control Suspension. One, because of Seth, because Seth has known these guys for a very long time, Seth Thomas.
Yep.
And Seth is like, hey, you guys do really good stuff. These guys do really good stuff. We should really try and get something together. And so Seth kind of brokered that, which was really nice. and offered to be a test pilot for it and go out and run it on the car and help develop it. And so one of the things that I had a conversation with Wyatt at MCS was, if we're going to do this, then one, it has to be a Dundon exclusive, because I'm getting tired of enabling people to go off after we put energy and time into it to just go out and sell stuff.
Right. And they're
without
like, hey, look
us.
what I got. Yeah.
Hey, look, yeah, these guys helped me design it, and now it's off into the world and we're kind of cut out of it. So why put our time into it? That was a small company learning that we learned. And the second thing was, it has to work for front axle lift, because they're predominantly a race car company. You know, they put suspension on race cars. Lee Keen has them. Goldcrest uses them. You know, a bunch of people put them on their cup cars, BMW, you know, race cars, et cetera, et cetera. But we all know our street cars are too low to get in the Starbucks drive-through, and without front axle lift, and to not have it would really make it kind of silly to make a suspension improvement. You'd sell some, but it really wouldn't be worth the time to develop it and build the videos and all that.
Yeah, we've actually taken plenty of others off before here that they had a suspension on their car put on, and it was just, well, the benefit, I'm a second and a half faster at the track, but this is a pain, so I want to put the stock stuff back on. You know, so then that's definitely the give or take what's more important, and that was the usability of the car over the slight, I don't want to say slight performance benefit, because it's more than that. Right. But it was, you know, it just opened up like somebody on a track bike with race headers that, it drones too much, but I love the sound. It's great, but no, it drones too much. So they, you know, you compromise and you go one way, you know, so. Yeah.
What I love, you know, what you guys do, and for me, it's the engineering and it's the whole thought process, is that, like, talk about the airflow, for example, you know, this idea, I do something over here, what does it affect over here, right? And one of the things, you know, you talk about with the wing, and depending on what I do on the rear, then what do I have to do to change in the front, right? Because whether I get more lift or whatever the case may be. So it's this idea of, you know, thinking things all the way through, as opposed to, yes, I'm just going to slap a big wing on the back of the car. Look at this. Doesn't it look cool? You want this. It's like, yeah, but I can make it real dangerous if it's not engineered properly. And I think you guys do go through that extra step. You run the math, you do the testing to say, no, this is well thought out. You know?
Well, and one thing that's important is when, especially for me, it's easy to correlate with exhaust design, at least for me at this stage, where, you know, you do the math on it, as basic as it is or as complex as it is, and then we do some testing with it. And if it lines up or doesn't line up, you know, you have a little bit more work to do to say, okay, we got some results we weren't expecting. Well, let's continue on versus, this works. Or the phrase that I absolutely love hearing all the time that everyone says is, oh, this is good enough. You know, and they just find an excuse to push it out and let it go. And it's like, how do you know that's great? Oh, well, but it made 10 horsepower. I was like, 10? What if there's 30 in it? Well, we would have already been there. I was like, well, that's the first revision. We've got some items that we've revised many times. I think the CADD system, I spent 4 months developing that till we got to the system we're at with that. And even with the intake stuff, like we call them GT4 intake runners. They're really DFI intake runners for Fit 981, 991, Carreras, non-GT3 cars from 2009 up. And we made, I think, the 3 revisions on those is what it took. But the last one, the math that I did with that lined up exactly as predicted of the amount of power they made and the RPM point where it's supposed to make power.
Right.
Almost exactly. So it was like, okay, that's what it was intended to do. And it kind of shows kind of proof, which is kind of great. That way it's not just a throw your hands up in the air. Hey, we got lucky, or it's a guess.
We have 3 products. We have 1 product, 997 GT intake runners, that we have seriously been working on now for over 18 months.
Yep.
And sometimes you have a good idea of what you think is going on, and then things kind of get really complicated. And the math gets really complicated, and variables that you weren't sure you needed to account for or even understand need to be accounted for, and you need to start to understand them to be able to get the product that you want. And so the quote, we could have probably shipped these parts a year ago if we were the quote good enough company.
Yep.
Because they make a gob of torque. I mean, they change a 996 GT3 and a 997 GT3 to be relevant to a 991 GT3 power wise.
Wow.
Like a giant increase in power.
Wow.
We just didn't like where the peak was. The driving experience as you're coming into Redline, it wouldn't have felt good. It would have been, hey, this car's ripping fast. What happened? So we've been spending the last 12 months essentially trying to move that peak around. And sometimes you get your ass handed to you by the math. And we've had our ass handed to us in the last year from a commercial standpoint, continuing the best time. I think we're up to 9 revisions on this part. Is that right, Charles?
1, 2, 3. No. We're only 5. Only 5.
5. Okay, 5. But it takes that kind of fortitude and that kind of tenacity to stick with it. And because we're a small business and eventually we do have bills to pay and we have to make money, we can't just continually fly down a rabbit hole of development.
15 years from now, it's like, we're still working on that. You know, at some point you got to go, all right, we're either going to put it out there or it's done.
Yeah, some of it always is go back to, no matter what the dyno says, when you're not sure, you just kind of hop in the car, go drive it how it's intended to be driven. And if there's any spot of it that you have a slight reservation about, or that little, you stop for a second and pause and think, okay, it's great, but it's missing this last little 2% to be amazing. And that's kind of what we're focusing on. And, you know, we definitely learned a lot, and we're still learning a lot. And there's a lot, more than a lot. There's an enormous amount that we're learning that we have to learn to be able to continue on. So we took a little bit of a pause to do a little bit more, to get a model,
to do the research
more correct, I guess, development. Yeah, just to help us do the correct research. It's not just throwing stuff into a fire.
Right. So
anybody that does R&D, you know, it's a back and forth kind of thing. You do research to do development, and then you got to back up to do the research.
You got to go out, you got to test it. And then like Charles said, you know, you guys are sports cars enthusiasts. You have the cars, you drive the cars. I got to go out and drive it. And is it giving me the experience, you know, what I feel in the butt of my, you know, the seat of my pants when I'm driving the car, et cetera. And, you know, you're kind of making that assessment versus I'm just building a product and I'm not necessarily, you know, testing it the way, you know, your customers will test it. Because a lot of your customers, they're out there on the track. Sure, you have your cars and coffee customers, right? But you have a lot of customers that are going to go out there and they're going to test those things one way or the other by, you know, how hard they drive their cars.
The thing that I've come to realize, you know, it's probably been there the whole time. When you are a car guy, we're all the same. Track rat, mountain driver, drivers, cars and coffee, whatever. We're using these as a conduit to put a smile on our face. We're using these as an escape from our daily life. We're using these as an emotional release. And so if the thing that you're doing, it's the same reason girls buy handbags and shoes or jewelry, or boys like watches and whiskey and whatever, there's a differentiator and there's an emotional component to it.
Absolutely an emotional.
We're trying to ensure that all the attributes of the product, not the emotions. The emotions kind of, they happen automatically. And I've learned I'm like I said, engineer, business owner, I'm horrible at marketing. I don't know how to market anything. I just kind of throw information out there and hopefully people like to hear what the hell I'm talking about. But I'm learning that
I give you a little more
the market part of it is the emotion, right? It's the emotion. If you can crystallize how you're going to feel when you buy this dive plane or gurney flap or set of suspension or exhaust or whatever, then you don't have to sell it.
And your customers, are advocates. I mean, everybody I've ever run into, including myself when I talk to people, anybody who's had your products, I've never heard anyone not
which is the
say,
absolute best compliment. That
you
is
know,
the
I mean, I've
absolute
never
best
heard anybody say anything negative. And you just read stuff. I mean, any of the forums that are out there, any of the Porsche forums, any of the discussions that are out there, you know, it's just, you know, like you said, people have to ask themselves, you know, what is, why, right? Why do I want
Right.
this? What am I looking for?
Right.
Because, you know, it's easy to say, well, that's expensive, because we know that other company out there that begins with an A, their stuff is real expensive.
Right.
But it's like, what do you get for the money, and what do you want to get for the money? I mean, if you want to have
That's
a really
right.
nice, great looking piece of metal, and, you know, it might help you with performance, well, that's great. Are you looking for, so I think that's a really good first question you brought up earlier, is what is it that you're looking to get? And then the other piece that for me is, you know, Charles, I guess maybe it was spring of last year or something, you know, you and I had a long conversation there at the lodge, was just really understanding the thought and the work that goes into this, and what you know, what you guys do. And then when you get that product and you're like, yeah, I mean, this is it. This
I mean, the simple things like an exhaust should fit on the car when you receive it. And if you talk to any Porsche technician that's been doing this for a while, we will to this day get phone calls from Porsche techs after they've installed something, just thanking us for how easy it was to install the part.
Oh yeah, my guy, when I put it on my car, yeah, it was like no problem.
It just falls on the car.
Yeah.
And that's because of all the things that Charles has learned over the last 15 years to ensure that when we make it, when you weld a thing, it will want to, the metal will want to pull to where the weld is, right? It'll automatically want to lean that way.
Okay.
So you have to weld it in a certain order, in a certain way, so that it stays straight. There's all of this craftsmanship that goes into all these little tiny hidden secrets that if you don't know and you go and try and duplicate it, you end up where the industry was 20 years ago, with guys with pry bars out and sawzalls trying to make stuff fit on a car.
Trying to put stuff on.
There's always a faster way to build it and weld it and manufacture it, but does that mean it's the better way to do it? And a lot of times there's, you know, we can cut a lot of our production time down here, what's in house, but we probably wind up with a lot of comebacks, or hey, this doesn't fit, or hey, I got to cut and re-weld this.
And that's all about, you know, the quality and the service and the expectation, right?
And some of it's just minutes. It's not even hours. It's just minutes of time. Sometimes that, you know, big manufacturers want to save 3 minutes of time from someone's day, and they'll justify that over a whole year and say, oh, well, you know, we'll save $2,000.
One less person.
But that's another 300 products we can get out for this part that's $100. So we'll make another $30,000. That's all that they look at, you know.
Yeah, that's a good, you know, that comment you made earlier about, you know, what the manufacturers are up against, you know, timelines, budgets, et cetera, marketing, right? We can't produce a GT3 with 800 horsepower. We have to produce it with 520, then 550, then 580, whatever the case may be, the iterations. But to your point, it's like, we don't have those constraints. I think people like to challenge when they hear that, well, I mean, come on, Porsche is 520. Why are you guys all of a sudden able to generate 560? Like, you know, and it's like, well, they could too, but they just have.
Correct.
We don't have.
Thank you for saying that.
But some people would challenge that, right?
I mean, what did they make in the 918 out of a turbo 4-cylinder? 1,200 horsepower or something ridiculous. So yes, Porsche knows how. Yeah, there is no doubt in my mind that if we said, please make an 800 horsepower naturally aspirated flat six, we'd have one in a week.
Yeah, they got to make money on it, number one. Number two, got to pass emissions. Everything else is by choice, but those are the two facts that they have to live by no matter what.
Correct.
And that's
why everybody's losing their face over the particulate filter.
Yeah.
But if you look at the engineering that Porsche has done to get that car to pass, wizardry. You take a Speedster apart, and Charles noticed this. There's no carbon in the exhaust anywhere.
Yep.
Wow.
Before the filter. Before it even gets to the filter, there's no carbon in it.
Wow.
So they have tuned this thing to a level that was before completely unnecessary. and now it's burning so super clean that so absolutely kudos to the masters. You know, we're just some squirrels out here trying to find a nut, quite honestly.
Some squirrels out here. So hey, I'm going to fast forward here a little bit.
Yeah.
And so soon we should have a both a 992 GT3 and I believe a 718 GT4 RS. So when a new model or a new generation comes out, what's kind of your, do you look to get your hands on, like, hey, somebody local want to give their car up?
Biggest problem we've got.
Is that right?
You know, that's one of the things that Charles relies on me for. I have to find a local car. Now I'll give a huge shout out to our local dealer, Roger Jobs. Nice. And the way that we were able to get our 718 GT4 is I'm leasing this car on a short-term lease. And he was like, have at it. Do your bestest. I would love to sell it with everything you have on it when I get it back.
Nice.
And so I am
very supportive. Very supportive.
That is awesome.
And Roger doesn't have to be. He's been a dealer for 40 years.
Yeah, so it's not like he's like got to sell
he's
cars.
In his 70s.
Right, yeah.
I'll write him a text message on a Sunday just so that I don't forget to do it on Monday, and he'll write me back Sunday at 8:00 at night.
Awesome.
Which is like he doesn't have to. He does it because he wants.
Yeah, that's a good partner
right?
to have there.
Which is great. Yeah. So hopefully that partnership continues. The GT2 we have, we're lucky to have some customers here locally that you know I give them crap about it, but it's only because I'm jealous. I call them a one of each. And they have many of the nicest cars that you might want to
I can
partake
imagine.
in.
Yeah, I can
so
imagine.
Sometimes all you have to do is ask, hey, can we borrow this for a little bit? We're going to take it apart and scan it. And if you're interested, then I'll get you a really great deal on something.
Yeah.
So, and as our brand has grown, those opportunities have become more possible in a lot of ways because people know us. They know the quality of the stuff that they're going to get if they join us in a partnership. Unfortunately, we're still.
Yeah, no, that's awesome because you know my plan is here. You know, I think I want to try this if they do have this 718 GT4 RS. I want to give that thing a try. And folks are like, really, you're going to give up 911 or give up, you know, I was like, you know, a couple things for me is one is I had a 997.2 GT3. That was my first GT car. My first Porsche was an 09 Carrera S. And if you go back, even the 997 now, I mean, these cars have just gotten so big. I mean, they're big. You know, when I drive the 3RS on some of the roads in the mountain, I'm like, I feel like I'm just like hanging over the whole thing. And then, you know, when I used to drive Alan's GT4, that thing was just a blast, right? And so it's this idea too that, you know, being a car enthusiast, there's just so many neat cars that are out there. It's like, why not test and experience these different cars, right? You know, I've driven. My whole track experience has been in a rear engine pendulum car. So I know how to drive that really well around the track. Yep. You know, get me a mid-engine car. Well, I got, you know, some learning to do, but that's part of the fun, right? Is learning how to experience. So I'm really interested in,
it's funny. My comment about the 718 GT4 when I was driving it on track is it reminded me of my 997 GT3 RS.
Is that right?
Almost immediately. The size, the weight transfer. Of course, it's mid-engine. It does things differently than a 997. But just after driving my 991.2 RS on track for so long and a 991.1 GT, I mean, it's been pretty much the whole time we've been at Dundon. I've been in a 991 GT car. And the difference, it immediately harkened back to lightweight, just smaller is better kind of thing, right? The visibility in the car is different. The steering feel is different. It feels less like a giant sledgehammer and more like a scalpel. You know, and that's a horrible analogy.
And there's some play, and there's some movement. I mean, these RSs, I mean, good Lord, you know, you're on the mountain roads, even on the track. I mean,
Right.
that car makes you look like a hero. I mean, that car just
Sure.
sticks. I mean, you
Right.
look where you want to go, and the car just goes there, you know.
Right.
And it's like where other cars, like in the 997.2, some of the other cars, you know, there's a little more finesse.
You had to work.
You know, to
Yeah,
manage,
work.
you know, the weight
Right.
transfer and just, you know, when you're getting back on the throttle. Don't get me wrong, the .2 RS is a boatload of fun. I just want to experience, you know,
Right.
so
And
the
we will be
GT4
there to bring a bigger smile to your face and whichever one that you end up with.
and I'll have the checkbook in hand, ready to write you a check too.
Our goal, honestly, is to finish the development on the 718 GT4. I'm hoping by Thanksgiving we should be able to give the car back. Aero should be finished. We kind of have to have it done by then because our track season will be. That's pushing it to think that I'm going to get a dry track day in November around here.
Right. Yeah, you are.
Get the exhaust finished. It's based off of what we've seen with this engine. I don't think Porsche is going to have to do much to make a GT4 RS with a PDK more powerful. There's some should be some easy things they can get out of this engine for the RS. I don't think they're going to put an actual dry sump GT engine in a Cayman.
Yeah, I don't think so. But you know, what do I know?
$250 million car, they will. But if it's not, then they won't.
That's right.
So,
if the GT4 RS is a 500 unit limited edition,
oh yeah, if it's like the 4.0 send off, you know, car,
correct. Then they might.
Then they might. But if they're just doing it the other way, like you said, they're, you know, I mean, the car is going to be like what, maybe 450, 449, or you know, something like that.
Even then, they're going to get a lot of crossover. The thing that I'm real interested to see is how the 718 GT4 with a PDK does, because the thing that's still a bit of a handicap in this car is the gearing.
Yeah.
It still has super long gearing. Now it's got way more torque and a much more linear power band, so you don't notice it as much, but it's still super long in second and third.
Yeah.
A PDK has an extra gear, and if you stack it up like a GT3, this thing will run down a 991.1 GT3 without breaking a sweat.
Oh, I believe that. And that's like you said, you know, they've got a marketing conundrum on their hands there.
Correct.
And, you know, we want to do this, but we don't want to piss off, you know, guys.
It's kind of like if you have, you know, a set of, you know, Air Jordans and you have, you know, black and red Air Jordans. Of course, you're going to want the blue and black Air Jordans. And of course, you're going to want these. And if you have the means, then of course you're going to have one of each. So why shouldn't Porsche just kind of let it all blend together and let guys buy one and sell one and buy this one and sell that one, or buy two and keep two? You don't have to pick one. You can have many.
That's
I mean, some of that is, in the end, that's why Porsche started making they've made almost 30,000 991 GT3 variants combined over just a couple thousand of all the others. Is in the end, they just decided they just wanted to make money because everyone else was second, the 4.0 RS and everything else. You know, $175,000 cars trading for $700,000-800,000. So Porsche's like, well, screw this. We want to make the money here, not let you guys make.
I know when I saw the one guy post the numbers of how many 997.2 GT3s were in North America versus the 991.1, I was like, man, the 997.2 is like a rare car.
Yeah.
I mean,
I look at the pumpkin that I have, and what is it, Charles? There's like 400 997.1 RSs in North America.
Maybe the orange variants. Yeah, there's a lot of certain color ones. We have the total numbers like 1,700 or something in North America. But
and then you look at 991.1 through 991.2, and holy crap, Porsche just put the hammer down. So
yeah, each variant newer, they kept producing more. I think the .2 RS is the highest produced one out of them all, and the .1 GT3 the lowest, if I remember right.
Charles, thanks for your time. I know you're busy, man. It's always good talking to you. I love hearing your stories, what you guys do. It's like super exciting.
So many small other stories versus just like a minor little bit of a starting point. But every product has some fun story somewhere about it buried. That,
Oh yeah.
Really that nobody knows, or we say something that's got an inside joke, or our
like how the crash pipe got its name.
Yeah.
But we'll save that for next time.
Yeah, right. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, hey, look, you have a good rest of your day. Thank you for your time. We'll chat again soon. I enjoy bringing this content to you. If you'd like to see more of this content, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, click the notification bell, and I would appreciate if you would share with your friends. Thank you.